I'd like to begin on an unusual note by talking about some early influences and events that shaped my career as a manager. Experience has been my greatest teacher, perhaps richer than any formal management education might have been. My first job was as cadet purser on the Orient Line, which in the 50s carried hundreds of thousands of British emigrants to the Antipodes. This was the first such voyage for many of the passengers, and during the 6 weeks at sea there were plenty of possibilities for friction, dissatisfaction, and stress. This was also my first raw experience with the demands and behavior of customers in what were often tense situations. Seasickness has a deep, mood-altering effect, and not for the better. But I also perceived that my own behavior and my peers could make a deep impression on people's awareness and understanding. So I set out to build buoyant relationships with the passengers through helpfulness, friendliness, and courtesy. I would make certain the children had the right breakfast cereal before tantrums broke out. Or I'd help get those affected with mal de mer, or mal de bottle, discreetly to their cabins. The approach worked. The passengers became aware of what was reasonable to demand of the crew, and we were scrupulous about meeting those demands. On those occasions when we went beyond the call of duty, we typically got an appreciative response. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was practicing what was to become known several decades later as customer service, the cornerstone of a future business strategy. Some years later, I emigrated to the United States to become a management trainee with the Hertz Car Rental Corporation. One of the most significant first impressions the United States made on me was not, as I recall, the big automobiles, the high-rise buildings, or the frenzied pace of life, though these did impress, naturally. Rather, it was the quality of service at the average diner or humble restaurant. I was repeatedly amazed by the fact that the coffee came unsolicited, like magic, the instant I sat down, and my cup was replenished automatically thereafter. For someone accustomed to the austerities and bad service of post-war Britain, this was rocket science in terms of customer service. So too were incredible things like valet parking, supermarket bag packing, and the flub stubs that guaranteed no quibble refunds if the product or service wasn't up to scratch. In crossing the Atlantic, I'd traveled to a place where the customer is king, and a king he or she remained in my mind. Britain was a land of sorry, sir, where every sort of provider created and abided by absurd codes of conduct that often suggested the customer had no rights at all. The contrast was liberating. Thenceforth, the task of satisfying customer needs and the building of customer loyalty became a core philosophy of mine. Harold Janine, the business genius who built IT&T, once told me, "You read a book from the beginning to the end. You run a business the opposite way. Start at the end and then do everything you must to reach it." What he was saying is that you don't just sit around dreaming up new products. You go first of all to the customers, discover their choices and preferences, and deliver them as precisely as possible. In the many decades since my talk with Janine, customer satisfaction and putting the customer first have almost become cliches, the acknowledged goal of all businesses. However, I believe that many companies only pay lip service to the power and effectiveness of putting the customer first. In reality, I suspect that only a handful of global companies are 100% dedicated to putting the customer first. I have often been asked why, after a pretty successful transatlantic management career, I opted to quit as Deputy CEO of Sears in 1982 and take on the leadership of an overmanned, moribund, demotivated British government-owned airline, especially since the airline industry was notoriously volatile and prone to high uncertainty. Among the factors that weighed in my decision was my experience as a British Airways customer. Whenever I flew British Airways, I could see that service standards were showing signs of severe fatigue. But I also recognized that there was a noticeable hidden depth to the people. It was clear that none of those I met regularly at the airports or on board the aircraft came to work to do a bad job. It was the system that worked against them. They were manacled by the company's perception of the needs of its own production processes rather than the needs of its customers. The task of turning around British Airways was something like an archaeological dig. Once the dust and debris of ages had been carefully brushed away, we uncovered the jewels. And the brightest of them were the very professional and highly skilled people of British Airways. I thought they were capable of being the best in the industry. What they lacked were the right tools, the right motivation, and the right leadership. They lacked an environment in which their skills and experience could be freed up to respond to their customers, rather than remain constrained and frustrated. What they needed was a market-led, customer-sensitive organization. The results are there for everyone to see. I have no hesitation in saying that our evident success is almost wholly due to the commitment of the people of British Airways, whether they work behind the scenes or at the points of sale and service delivery. Today, my deepest concern is for British Airways to continue to measure up to the challenges posed by liberalized trade in Europe and the world at large. In the freer global environment, there will be fewer artificial barriers or structural inefficiencies that can be used as excuses for inadequate service. Although technology and innovation are obviously important competitive factors, it is customer service that will be the deciding factor in creating sustained profits. This is the age of marketing, and its core discipline is customer service. I'm convinced that the days of penny-pinching, accountancy-based business planning are coming to an end. However, many companies don't fully recognize this new imperative. Instead, they are underinvesting in marketing and customer-driven initiatives in preference to short-term accountancy-led tactics. And even many of those espousing a strong customer orientation believe that structure and complexity and systems can substitute for a real hands-on approach, which is why they fall far short of their objectives. The leadership of many companies still doesn't get the fact that customer involvement means they must have a personal and intimate understanding of the customer-supplier interface. Many of my CEO peers seem a bit schizophrenic about marketing, as demonstrated in a recent Marketing Council survey of British marketing professionals. They all agreed that marketing would increase in importance over the next 5 years. They felt that marketing know-how was necessary for the survival of companies. And they believed that the whole company, not just one department, needed to understand marketing and contribute to it. That was the good news. But the bad news showed that there is a deep split within many corporations on the returns from serious marketing investments. Respondents to the survey felt their marketing initiatives were frustrated because they suffered from short-termism, lack of strategy, and inadequately trained people. They believed that most chief executives were driven by financial or production priorities, not those of the market. I suspect these views come as no surprise to marketers in the United States. As a result, I asked the London Business School to investigate some of the dimensions of this problem. I suggested they look for models of excellence among market-oriented, externally focused organizations with a firm grasp of marketplace dynamics, including but not confined to an understanding of the expressed and latent needs of customers. The research, which is still in progress, involves responses from 400 British managing directors. It examines value systems and market-sensing behaviors and analyzes their impact on different types of businesses. The study makes distinctions between standard marketing strategies, such as focus groups, in companies that have a deep marketing commitment, and compares them with those where marketing has lower priority. I believe that while market sensing may be important, without a market-oriented value system driving and guiding an organization's behavior, activities like market research may get absolutely nowhere. One of the ways to remedy this is for management to rigorously test the depth, sincerity, and completeness of its value system and how it relates to the customer. The findings of the study, which apply equally well to marketers in the United States, strongly indicate that high marketing value firms do better than less committed rivals. It supports the premise that the marketing concept as an underlying value system is much superior to a set of marketing behaviors. The point is that marketing practices have limited power in themselves when they're not supported by the corporate culture. The distinction is between ritual and commitment. Marketing practices work best where they emerge from a deep, comprehensive commitment to the market. For instance, time spent by the chief executive with customers appears to be linked positively with business performance. This research is building up one of the most convincing pieces of evidence in favor of market-based business strategy. It demonstrates that a strong external focus is critical to success. While the CEOs in the study indicated that they spend less than 15% of their time in direct contact with customers, I do sense small signs of change. I know of several businesses that have adopted strategies that encourage senior management to go out and actually talk to real live customers. In some cases, this basic, obvious, but forgotten practice is driving formal market research and analysis. In management literature, we often see innovation praised and extolled. But innovation is not abstract. It has to be forged out of a concrete set of circumstances. I believe that the root of most innovation comes from the supplier-customer interface, not the lab. The most innovative companies are the ones that listen, and that don't feel threatened or defensive about criticism. If those of us who head companies don't keep our customers in sight and earshot all the time, we deserve to be passed over. This challenges the status quo in many firms where production and finance have the upper hand. To succeed in today's environment, customers have to be brought out of the back room and put front and center in every aspect of business activity. In conclusion, I'd like to summarize my beliefs with a number of interrelated maxims that anyone taking over an operation, whether it's a company or a division, might find helpful. Never take an organization at face value. Look beneath the hood to see if the raw material of human potential is there. Ask yourself night and day, have I created the right structures to liberate the skills and potential of the entire workforce? Be candid. Do not dissemble consciously or unconsciously. Too many bosses are hypocritical or get into states of make-believe. Cut out all lip service ideas. Remember, it's the customer who pays your salary and everyone else's. Embed customer service and accountability to customers at all levels of the organization. Do not be overly reliant on internal processes and systems. There is no substitute for direct face-to-face interaction with customers. Know the strengths and limits of your organization. Don't overreach. Don't promise subordinates or customers what you can't deliver. Keep your strategies simple. Don't over-intellectualize. Leave exotic management ideas to business schools and consultants. Invite challenges. Dare your customers to make audacious demands. Let experience be your teacher. Ask yourself continually, what lesson is staring me in the face? What are people seeking from my company? And what can I do to help them get it? There's no mystique about the objectives of serving customers and making money. The great thing about management is that it is truly democratic. Anyone can play. Anyone can break through the conventional wisdom and see what's crying out to be done.
Part 4. Culture. 15 glorious years.
When management consultants Tom Peters and Robert Waterman pass away and arrive at the pearly gates, they may have some explaining to do. St. Peter is sure to ask, are you the authors of In Search of Excellence, the early 80s bestseller that popularized the idea of a corporate culture? Weren't you the ones who said that excellent companies are those with a strong, unifying culture and a shared vision? Yes, they'll say, looking demurely at their feet. Then you must be aware, St. Peter will continue, that the concept of a corporate culture has completely dominated business thought management ever since. The consultants will smile. Okay, Tom and Bob, St. Peter will say with genuine curiosity, I'm willing to let you into heaven, provided you can satisfy me on one point. What is corporate culture? Chances are that Peters and Waterman would be hard-pressed for a definitive explanation, as would many thousands of consultants and managers. Culture is a word as beguiling as it is ambiguous. That it exists, nobody can doubt. But most of us are unaware of the cultural constructs that guide our actions and beliefs in everyday life. Corporate or organizational cultures are even more elusive and difficult to comprehend. 15 years after its publication, it is clear that In Search of Excellence was a liberating event. Terence Deal's Corporate Cultures, published the same year, was also influential in getting the word culture into common business use. It was not a breakthrough, since academics had been onto the topic about a decade earlier. But after the splash made by the Peters and Waterman book, nobody could think about management issues without giving some weight to a company's unitary culture and its fit with strategy and structure. Inevitably, some of the richness of the cultural dimension of business and organization has become trivialized. Inevitably, too, there is sometimes an excess of evangelism about the ease and appropriateness of cultural intervention and modification. Even so, there remains a sustained interest in a great number of organizations in acquiring accessible and usable concepts about their culture that can make a significant impact on the way they manage their business.
Transforming the Culture of a Global Enterprise, One Employee at a Time, by Melvin R. Goods, Warner Lambert Company. In 1991, 26 years after joining the company in Canada, Mel Goods became chairman and CEO of Warner Lambert at a time of deep uncertainty. A global company with 3 diverse core businesses, pharmaceuticals, consumer health and personal care products, and confectionery, Warner Lambert found itself confronted with the need for essential and extensive restructuring if it was going to overcome Wall Street's perception that it was a prime takeover candidate. His first task was to address the capabilities of the existing agents of change, from top management to the most junior employees within each operation. What he found was a culture of entitlement that had to be transformed into a culture that expressed, stimulated, and rewarded individual and team performance.
Those who step into the top jobs of the world's largest companies soon learn that their lives have become much like the heroes and myths. In fact, their task bears a strong resemblance to the labors of Hercules. They're only given a few years, never enough, to make their mark and to triumph. Then the fates whisk them off the glittering stage. In practice, this means an incoming CEO has a unique but quickly evaporating opportunity to redirect an organization suffering from the inertia inherent in employing many thousands of people around the world. He or she only gets to be the new CEO once, which means swiftly establishing leadership, defining the new direction and strategy, and getting everyone into the sprinter's blocks. After the CEO has created a clear vision and set of goals, there can be no second thoughts. You can't risk changing the message for at least 5 years. It takes that long to change behavior in massive global organizations. Subtle links of culture and behavior. For most CEOs, the principal lever for change is the company's culture. Culture is the coding of values and deeply held beliefs that mold an organization's decision patterns, guide its actions, and drive individual behavior. Culture acts as the backbone of behavior in most organizations. Like the genetic coding hidden away at the core of every living cell, it shapes and models the decisions made by an organization. Visibly, it's the way we do things around here. Less visibly, it functions in depth as the matrix of the beliefs, values, and attitudes that permeate an organization. Durable and deeply embedded, the corporate culture provides continuity, which is an important asset. But it also creates a major drawback. Because it is so deep and powerful, a company's culture is inherently difficult for a CEO to modify during the limited time of his mandate. The values that drive an organization's behaviors are potent. They can block a company's strategy or catalyze it. Strength and fit are what matter. A strong culture can be an enormous advantage if it's in sync with the organization's strategies. On the other hand, if the fit is flawed, the strengths of a culture are also likely to be its greatest weakness. All of those beliefs and norms propel the company toward mediocrity, or worse. It's the strong cultures with a good fit to strategy and the business results or potential to prove it that attract the best people. Typically, culture change is triggered top-down from the chief executive, but it is actually achieved from the bottom up. Enduring cultural change is created with practical tools, such as measures, rewards, and carefully structured people practices. One key tool is a strategy for superior performance based on a cultural analysis of the way people work, followed by appropriate reshaping of those practices and attitudes. However, this requires a deep and sensitive understanding of the ways in which individuals interact with the corporate culture. Such an analysis must discern how individuals perform in order to help them not only work smarter and more productively, but also to enable them to adapt to a continuous succession of new challenges and market demands. By first communicating and then demonstrating these new expectations, rewards, and disincentives, cultural transformation becomes a process of stimulating change one employee at a time. There are many ways of approaching this task, and the path chosen depends on each corporation's individual circumstances. At Warner Lambert, two of the tools we used in the 1991 to 1996 transformation of individual employee behavior could not have been more down to earth. First, we embarked on a program of defining, articulating, and propagating 5 core values. Second, we adopted a 360-degree program for the evaluation of all managers and many supervisory and support personnel. The name of this new program was chosen to suggest that every point on an individual's compass, every aspect of behavior, needs to be brought into the assessment. Articulating corporate values crisply and communicating them consistently is a well-established management practice. The problem is that too few companies pay much attention to their vaunted values beyond that initial exercise. Even fewer employ a formal 360-degree evaluation program to help their managers evolve. While both tools have obvious merit, Warner Lambert cultivated change at the intersection of the two programs, each reflecting and validating the other. Instead of the traditional direct review by a superior, employee performance would now be evaluated by subordinates and peers, as well as by supervisors, and the employee himself or herself. The reviewing group includes everyone to whom an individual provides significant services within the company. The 5 core values, the catalyst for change. Values exist in abundance, and acceptable statements of values can be cranked out at the drop of a hat by communications departments. However, real cultural transformation cannot be created through slogans or aspirations. Values must be based on actionable practices that everyone can recognize and emulate. They must be rooted in what actually goes on in a company day to day and embody the best practices distilled from the way people actually work. At Warner Lambert, the effort to crystallize the company's most valued practices, what the company stands for, how it operates, and how it treats others inside and outside the organization, led us to target 5 critical attributes. 1. Focusing on what's important. Sound science. Providing customers with superior products at attractive prices. Speed of action. Excellence in execution. And constant readiness to seize opportunities globally. 2. Being fast and first to exploit new opportunities, from strategy to implementation. 3. Rewarding the true successes of individuals and teams. 4. Being open and candid in all our dealings with each other, our suppliers, and our customers. 5. Prizing creativity and prudent risk-taking. Added together, these core values go a long way toward defining the new Warner Lambert. They give the company a distinctive personality in the eyes of employees, customers, partners, suppliers, investors, and the communities around the world in which the company is situated. Merely stating these core values, however, was only the first step. We also had to go the extra distance and make certain that our employees understood all the dimensions of these values so that their behavior meshed with corporate expectations. Leading, not preaching. Asking, not telling. To support its 5 most valued practices, Warner Lambert launched the 360-degree evaluation system among employees worldwide. Surveys were distributed to more than 10,000 employees, asking them to give confidential evaluations of the managers and team members with whom they work, and to evaluate themselves as well. Feedback would come from 4 perspectives: supervisors, peers, direct reports, and oneself. This approach was distinctively different from the soft agenda of a personality assessment. Its goal was to arrive at actionable results, with specific targets and a base against which both individual and team progress could be measured. These evaluations were designed around the newly articulated core values. They forged a visible link between the new evaluation process and the company's commitment to building ongoing change in its culture worldwide. Thanks to the design of the evaluation, it clearly tied individual performance to company performance. This, in turn, provided managers and employees with the empirical evidence they needed to make certain that their interests were identical with the company's. They could see that what was good for Warner Lambert was good for them as well, because a high value score cleared the path for advancement. Do we walk our talk? One reason these values are taking root and changing the culture of Warner Lambert globally is the company's commitment to walking the talk. Rewards, promotions, incentives, and disincentives are now aligned with the company's most valued practices and with employees' 360-degree evaluations. This change produced culture shock. Things were now very different than even the recent past, when reviews were perfunctory. In those days, few performance distinctions were made. Virtually every employee got a C. As a result, there tended to be only narrow differences between the compensation of outstanding performers and marginal ones. In the end, performance reviews provided no incentive whatever for employees to excel. Under the new 360-degree program, the company introduced a forced ranking system that graded each employee's contributions. Today, the spread in compensation between top and bottom performers in the same job can differ by as much as 60%. A powerful incentive for all individuals to rank well and to continually improve their performance against expectations. Acting on the evidence. In our experience, peer evaluation programs provide a credible and candid means for developing the individual. This is particularly true when the exercise is done without attribution, as a private and personal matter. Afterward, employees receive appropriate coaching and an individualized follow-up program. The 360-degree program was designed to overcome the serious lack of candor in most traditional superior to subordinate evaluation processes. Few of us are rigorously honest counselors. Most of us are uncomfortable in counseling unless the burden of our message falls at one extreme or the other, either praising staff for their accomplishments or admonishing them for error or failure. Few of us are skilled at giving clear, actionable advice about characteristics or skills that need improving, especially when we like the individual and overall performance is satisfactory. However, these deficiencies in counseling skills can be remedied by a carefully thought-out peer review in the 360-degree evaluation process. The lack of attribution frees people to offer honest and candid views about others' work and work relationships. Those on the receiving end of this analysis are forced to confront the reality of their behaviors. As a result, this approach gives employees a better grasp of how and why senior management arrived at key decisions. Although the 360-degree evaluation program bears a superficial resemblance to the run-of-the-mill peer reviews that have been around for a long time, this program is in fact different and much more powerful. Why? Because of the linkage with the 5 core values. Without this linkage, a peer review might lead to an interesting observation about employee performance, but it does not translate into a vehicle for cultural change. When observations are scattered all over the lot, they can't help but be unactionable and unmeasurable. Aggregating the results of the 360-degree survey provides an additional and highly valuable management tool. The ability to measure the composite performance of divisions in the United States and affiliates throughout the world. With this information, it becomes possible to explore a number of hypotheses and questions. Do higher-performing groups behave differently? How can these differences be factored into the company's most favored practices and spread across the entire organization? This material gives us valuable insights into the distribution of the strongest and weakest support for the 5 basic values. The result has been global benchmarking and the dissemination of superior practices throughout Warner Lambert. The aggregation study provides a means of tracking the progress of different operating units year by year. Warner Lambert sees the heart of the matter as the need to drive these core values and practices down through the company. Actionable core values and the new performance evaluations are mechanisms for keeping people focused. This is a vital and constant challenge in a company with a diversity of businesses and product lines and a global reach. A Warner Lambert vice president comments. Robert Todd, Latin America, Asia sector. How often do you implement 360-degree evaluation surveys in Latin America and Asia? We do one every year. They're a vehicle for putting across our core values and getting people to understand them. They also make our people understand that they are personally accountable against them. By doing an evaluation each year, we're showing that we mean it. We take it seriously. These surveys are our best means of sustaining commitment and reinforcing company values. Doing evaluations annually also means that we're able to track progress from year to year and provide feedback to employees. Can you see a payback for what is clearly a substantial investment of time and resources? There is implicit evidence that our program is very valuable to us in creating behavioral change and that it is making us a more responsive organization. Warner Lambert has many lines of business, and they all exist in each country, so focus is a constant challenge for us. This program is working. Employees are buying into its goals and purpose. How do you gauge employees' responsiveness? There's a lot of empirical evidence. If you ask employees, they'll tell you that these values and the expectation that everyone will strive to perform against them are sinking real roots. People now challenge each other on whether they're being practiced in specific work situations. In Venezuela, on their own initiative, employees have printed these messages on the cafeteria tray papers. What results were least expected at the outset of the program? We're finding that not just managers, but employees at lower levels are showing increased understanding of the core values and their purpose, and they're putting them into practice at work. We can see this growing from year to year. There is real penetration through the ranks and through the organization. People aren't satisfied with just principles. They want to know what those principles look like in action. They want examples. They want to know how values work on the job so that they can learn them and use them. If the company is committed and demonstrates that commitment through a sustained effort, employees will figure out a lot of it for themselves. They'll work through what it means to be fast and first to market, and how you go about making that happen in actual work situations. As might be expected, the 360-degree survey evaluations are deployed somewhat differently by different operating groups. For example, Warner Lambert Colombia has developed 5 training modules. Each is built around one core value and practice to deepen employee understanding of how the values apply to their particular work situations. In Venezuela, hourly employees on the plant floor are being exposed to the core values and responding favorably with changes in attitude and behavior. Managing living culture. Without clear top management direction, the identity of large organizations can become confused. The larger the organization, the smaller the degree of clarity about who we are, where we're going, and how we get there. Headquarters may know who we are and why we are the way we are, and the business advantages of that identity. But this corporate self-knowledge gets diluted in subsidiaries, divisions, and branches. This in turn leaves managers and their subordinates to improvise the form and shading of the corporation's culture and values. The result is not necessarily a happy one. The vast technological and economic powers of a global giant may never be fully deployed in the business arena because, quite simply, there are no road signs and trail markers inside individual employees' minds. As a result, employees become much less productive and self-empowered. The management of culture, unheard of even 2 decades ago, constitutes one of the great new advances in the art of management. Yet in recent years, managers have soberly learned that culture is in many ways one of the most intractable and elusive targets of transformation. Too many companies fail to come to grips with the challenges and merely pay lip service by issuing a statement to the effect that our culture is thus or thus. This reduces what may be a vital business culture to a slogan that soon becomes empty and exhausted. Culture is a living thing. It should continually animate the hearts and minds of workers, spur them to greater self-development, and give them a more productive and rational environment.
From Dynasty to Rule by MBAs by Tanri Abeng, Bakary and Brothers. In an economy dominated by the ethnic Chinese, Bakary and Brothers, one of Indonesia's largest conglomerates, stands out because it was founded and is largely owned by pribumi, indigenous Indonesians. It stands out for another reason, too. It is one of the few local enterprises to adopt a modern professional management ethic. In the early 80s, Aborazol Bakary, son of the founder, took the helm and sold shares to the public. And in the late 80s, he hired Tanri Abeng, a locally prominent U.S.-educated manager. Born to a poor farming family, Abeng earned an MBA from the State University of New York at Buffalo on a scholarship to the United States. His first job was in finance and later in marketing for Union Carbide. His second was turning around the local operations of Heineken beer. Dubbed by Indonesians the billion rupiah manager, after the size of a reported $500,000 sign-on bonus from Bakary, Abeng is the man many regard as the best CEO Indonesia has produced, according to Asian Business of June 1994. Thanks in part to his efforts, Bakary Brothers, with a workforce of 15,000, is today a leading blue chip on the Jakarta and Surabaya stock exchanges. Since Abeng's appointment, the company's stock has risen by more than double. Other Bakary family interests are privately held and separately managed.
The injection of professional management into private companies that have grown too complex, too ambitious, or too inefficient happens thousands of times around the world every year. In the United States, this transition is often masterminded by outside investors and venture capitalists seeking to charge up the company for greater growth or to cure some of its weaknesses, or both. In less developed economies, the same transition is often sparked by members of the founder families, who foresee new circumstances that demand change and organizational reform, but who also recognize their own managerial shortcomings. For all its ubiquity, the transition to professional management is nonetheless hazardous, complex, and often slow to achieve results. This is because of the weight and sanctity of the past and the lingering power and prestige of the owner or ownership group. The new professionally trained leadership is often in an ambiguous position. As Peter Drucker has written, there is entrepreneurial work and there is managerial work, and the two are not the same. But you can't be a successful entrepreneur unless you manage. And if you try to manage without entrepreneurship, you are in danger of becoming a bureaucrat. Each type can be myopic about the other's virtues. Managers often see entrepreneurs as undisciplined risk-takers, while entrepreneurs often typify managers as timid bureaucrats in love with procedure. These stereotypes get in the way of the mission of professionals, whose task is to rationalize the firm and take it to a higher level of performance. However, in order to do this, they must dismantle and replace the existing management style and structure, which are often the creation of powerful founding personalities. Because of the eminence and prestige of the founders, as well as their relatives and heirs, the professional newcomers in gray flannel suits have to tread warily. When making changes in the status quo, they must be careful not to create the appearance that their predecessors have lost face, especially since they frequently are still powerful shareholders. At the same time, the new managers must also avoid creating friction with and between family members. This means that the incoming professional managers must have negotiation and consensus-building skills, or develop them quickly, so they can inject new processes and new ways of thinking without doing violence to the fabric and continuity of the firm. Professional managers must guard against arrogance or excessive pride in the new structures they're creating. Ideally, they need to penetrate the old structure and culture, not overwhelm it with strange new practices. If they don't take care, the whole restructuring process will backfire on them and provoke stubborn resistance to change. Slow-motion leap to professional management. This, in fact, happened in previous regimes at Bakary and Brothers, where attempts to change the culture failed. However, the latest attempt has succeeded nearly 100%. And because Bakri has safely negotiated this slow-motion leap to total professional management, we believe that other companies, even those in a quite different cultural setting, might learn some pointers from our transitioning experience. The transformation of Bakri and Brothers into a complex, multifaceted enterprise did not occur without some pain and sacrifice. In the name of greater efficiency, some of the old-timers had to go. In some cases, these dismissed workers were personal friends of the founding family. This made the decision harder for the professional managers, and tougher on the workers involved, since many of them believed they'd be employed for life. Among the many new and challenging performance measures that were adopted, one of the most significant was a new human resource recruitment policy. It demanded that all employees, including family members, had to meet essential criteria in skills and aptitudes. The family entrepreneurs versus the pros. Not only were people divested in this turnaround, so were entire lines of business, such as a shoe factory, an apparel joint venture, and some mining operations, because their future looked problematic. In the past, all proposals for new investments had been approved by the owner, but the incoming professional management group created an entirely new process. New capital expenditure proposals were reviewed by an investment steering committee, which had total authority in the matter. As it happened, the changeover of authority in the firm occurred at a time when the economic situation called for a cautious approach to capital spending to conserve resources during a difficult time. Instead of making new investments, my new management team focused on greater market penetration and lower production costs in order to improve cash flow in the company's strongest units: steel pipe, rubber plantations, and telecommunications. We adopted a strategy of vertical integration of Bakri's core businesses and strategic investment in high-growth sectors. And we also decided not to diversify its portfolio of businesses any further. This is a fairly typical aspect of change from private to professional management in formerly privately held businesses, since family dynasties typically seek portfolio diversification by putting all investments into the firm. While this approach has merit from the family's point of view, it can often lead to stumbling blocks to efficient management. On the other hand, in the changeover from a family-run company to one that is professionally run, the new management may discover it's necessary to accommodate the entrepreneurial vitality of some key family members. There is always the danger that professional managers will be, or will be perceived to be, too cautious about taking risks. The entrepreneurial spirit of the firm must be preserved, along with its aggressiveness in finding new opportunities for profit and in adding new businesses. This means that a balance must be achieved between untrammeled entrepreneurialism and the more systematic approach of the professional manager, who focuses on improving the performance of the current business and is often skeptical of the value of new ventures. One way around this is for the company to build a dual organizational structure that fosters both the entrepreneurial and professional drives in the company. The entrepreneurial personality is heavily focused on opportunism, on developing business ventures that could be the seeds of great growth. However, it typically underplays the problems inherent in managing startups. This approach may create chaotic situations during implementation due to lack of preparation and insufficient knowledge of the managerial backup needed for the new venture to succeed. By contrast, the professional personality is heavily invested in retaining and growing the existing business portfolio. It focuses on improving performance based on sound management principles and systems, on planning and controls and accountability, and on the growth and enhancement of skill sets. At Bakri & Brothers, the solution to this dilemma was to put individuals with entrepreneurial qualities in business development and those with professional abilities in operational functions. An entirely new standalone subsidiary, Bakri Investido, was created for new and entrepreneurial ventures, and it has recently made high-risk property and television investments that would not have been appropriate for a publicly listed company such as Bakri. One of the perils of founder-manager companies is the charismatic magnetism of the patriarch. Far too many decisions, from the trivial to the serious, must bear the stamp of the founder. which means that he is often powerless to reduce or filter the flow of issues that cross his desk. Even when professional managers are hired, some people continue to sidestep them and report directly to the founder, under the impression that this will curry favor. In this kind of climate, the danger is that too many people end up looking inward, trying to manage the boss, instead of looking outward to the marketplace and the competition. This used to be the case at Bakri. However, the new professional group changed this by focusing on managing the system and managing the market. This was brought about in part by analyzing the ingredients of the old centralized power structure and deconstructing them into rational categories and specializations. Indonesia or Indiana, the fundamentals are the same. These are some of the factors to bear in mind when a company is making the transition from private owner-managers to professional management. In the former environment, successful management is mythologized as a personal attribute of the founder and his lineage. In the latter, success is based on discipline, control, rationality, and freedom of action. However, the journey from one form of management to the other varies in both difficulty and speed depending on different family circumstances and different national cultures. Indonesia is not Indiana. Most commerce in Indonesia is controlled and run by families. There, the belief in the power and rightness of family management is very strong, while the belief and trust in non-family professional management has not yet found widespread favor. So for Bakri, the transition came about more slowly than, say, a situation in the Silicon Valley, where the founders give way to professional outsiders, and yet the fundamentals remain the same.